We better get back, because it'll be dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
Welcome to Mostly Horror.
Mostly.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Sean.
The big bad.
What's up, dude?
Big
the
bad.
big one.
Big bad. The biggest bad.
Take the bad, make it bigger.
Take the bad with the big.
Yeah.
Got a fun
Sometimes you gotta take the
for
bad
you.
with the big, dude.
Sometimes you gotta take the bad with the big. The small with the good, the bad with the big. We
What can
have
you
a
do?
really enjoyable episode today,
Yeah, we do.
as we always do. But this week joined by Chandler Baker, who is a wonderful novelist that you may know from her work, The Husbands and the Whisper Network, just Whisper Network. Recently, it was announced that Christopher Landon, who left the upcoming Scream project due to the many reasons that we've touched on before, this was going to be his next project, is that he was adapting the short story that was a part of Amazon's Creature Feature collection, along with works of Grady Hendrix, Paul Tremblay, Joe Hill, etc. He was going to be adapting the short story. And so we thought, you know what? Let's get Chandler on the show. Let's talk about her story, both her personal story with horror and her story of Big Bad. And we had a wonderful conversation with her. So hope you guys, I will say, we mentioned this in the interview, but this is a short story. I think the audiobook is less than 2 hours long. I think the book is like 68, 69 pages or something like that. Like the actual like Kindle-esque book or whatever. Not available physically, but we would like to get it. But read it. Do it. Yeah. Read it.
Read it.
Huck it, chuck it, football. Before we get to the conversation with Chandler, here's something you probably already know.
I'm sure you already knew that.
You only tell me stuff I already know.
You already know what I'm going to tell you.
Sean, there's a film coming out called Lisa Frankenstein, which you actually just saw, and maybe we'll talk about that on a later episode. But recently, Bloody Disgusting posted an exclusive that the writer, Diablo Cody, says she's not done with Jennifer's Body. Yeah. And so basically, John Squires posted an article because the Boo Crew, which is the Bloody Disgusting, I think, weekly podcast where they interview, similar to what we do, has an interview that they did with Diablo Cody with Lisa Frankenstein coming up. And while they didn't post the whole interview, they got a wonderful excerpt that they wanted to share as a bit of news. And the excerpt is basically like what I said. Diablo Cody. Let me read this little excerpt really quick.
Do it.
Talking about the film's resurgence, right? Jennifer's Body, and kind of what happened since it's released. She told the Boo Crew, I mean, it's gotten progressively happier for me. At first, I was excited about the film, but I was also a little bit salty because I remember thinking there was an audience when the movie came out. It was critical, commercial failure. I was pretty humiliated, to be perfectly honest with you. It was a rough experience having that movie come out. It was rough for me. It was rough for Megan Fox. And then people started suddenly liking it and talking about it like it was a good movie, which I had thought all along. At first I thought, oh, where was this audience when I needed it? And then I realized they were like 7. And then some people who maybe didn't appreciate it at the time have come around. And now I'm like, there's no saltiness. I'm just happy. So basically, I mean, this is the perfect example of a cult classic film. It maybe didn't have its audience when it first came out, but has garnered a very large one since, and is this like, Jennifer is like a pop icon, essentially, not just in horror films. But then when asked about possibly following up to the movie's universe, whether in film form or TV form, Diablo Cody said, yes, I want to do a sequel. I am not done with Jennifer's Body. I just need to partner with people who believe in it as much as I do, and that hasn't really happened yet. I need someone to believe in it who has $1 billion. That's what she said, which is fair. Totally get that.
Yeah.
So wanted to see your thoughts about that fun news.
Well, yeah, I feel like we've talked obviously a little bit about Jennifer's Body in the past. So I want to say just refresh at the beginning that I remember the first time I saw Jennifer's Body. I was in a friend's house for a party. It was probably not the right setting, but I remember like what I was looking for. Actually, that could be a perfect setting to watch that movie. So that's not necessarily what I'm saying. I'm just saying for me specifically, it probably wasn't the best setting at that time. And also what I was looking for in horror, which is something I've talked about before at that time, I didn't love it. I didn't like hate it, but I just didn't like super get into it. And I kind of just, it just kind of went by me, you know, it's like a thing that I saw partially at this thing. And yeah, it just never really stuck with me. And I never thought about it a ton until just a few years ago. I rewatched it, and yeah, it's a great movie. It's super fun. It makes sense that it has the cult following that it does. And honestly, maybe watching New Girl gave me like a whole different appreciation for it, if that makes sense.
Megan Fox.
Yeah, well, like I like Reagan in New Girl, and I don't know, maybe fair, that like kind of I don't know, it's weird. My brain's weird, but either way, yeah, and I could totally see them doing more with it. I feel like it's the type of story where you could potentially do more. I just also wonder what it would be. I feel like it would be easy to like potentially miss the mark on it. But I'm excited to hear that. You know, obviously original writer returning is a great thing. It's not like the studio is just trying to milk it because it's popular now or something. It sounds like, you know, Diablo still has the rights to it. So that's exciting. I think I would want, what do you see? Because I don't want them to like recast. I would want like Megan Fox and Amanda. I would want Megan and Amanda to come back. Yeah. And like, and do it that way. But I agree. Maybe that's just where my head's at. I don't
feel
want
like you can't do Jennifer's Body without Megan Fox.
Well, yeah, I mean they could. Oh God, they'd find a way. They'd find a way to.
You can't do Jennifer's Body without Megan Fox.
I agree.
That's definitely my
I want them both back for it though.
Yeah, I love Amanda Seyfried.
But yeah, I'm in. I'm in is the main point.
Great. Was there other news that they probably already know?
So this is, I saw the other day, and now I'm like really curious about my memory. But I remember earlier in our show, we were talking about horror and what horror could be in like different directions and like new concepts and things coming to the genre. And at one point we were specifically talking about like online horror, everything from creepypastas to weird videos and stuff like that. And I had mentioned something called the back rooms. And I feel like I've talked about it once or twice on the show, but I saw a post the other day saying that the Backrooms movie confirmed everything we know about A24's upcoming horror film. And I thought that was new news. Like I was like, holy shit, wait, really? But I guess that this was announced back in 23. But for whatever reason, it's kind of like resurfacing. So maybe there's been some developments, but
interesting. I think the person who did the original, Backrooms like videos is the person who's
doing it,
joining. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I could have sworn that we talked about it. I need Chelsea to fact check this, but
we might have. But either way, I guess my news
just posted something 3 days ago about it. Maybe just like
there
resurfacing.
It's for whatever reason it's resurfacing. And I guess if we already talked about it, I just want to add some more fuel to that fire. Then it perfectly fits in stuff you already know. The listeners are at home right now, like Sean. We already know that, and so did you. But yeah, and the only other thing, well, I'll wait till the end of the episode. I'll wait till the end of the episode to mention a little something else.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Kane Parsons, who was just 17 when they said that this was going to be adapted. So he's going to be like 18 years old working on this thing, which is great. I'm glad. He's the creator of the Backrooms thing. And then the writer
the Backrooms is like freaky.
Roberto Patino, who I'm not familiar with his work. He did a limited series called DMZ, which is, I'm not
DMX's son.
DMX is working for TMZ, is what that is.
Yeah.
All right. Anyways, Backrooms is a thing. It's happening. One last thing that they probably don't know. They actually don't know. So we can take this out of the segment. Chelsea, idea. I don't know if you need to play the little jingle backwards or what you have to do, but Sean, I watched Poison for the Fairies a couple days ago.
Hey,
I know I teased
And?
that. I teased that last time when I was talking about The Thing. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's
It's weird.
I agree that I would love to see a modern take on that. I think it could be
I
done
wanna
really
do
well.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I really like the I mean, so I think it kind of meanders for a little bit, and I think it's
Yeah.
maybe because it's an international film, and it just didn't like hit the mark 100%, and obviously has
Yeah.
all the not all the, but some of the telltale issues of older films, for whatever reason, budgetary reasons or whatever. But
Sure.
God, the last act and especially the last scene is just so dope.
Yeah.
It really like hits the mark, and I also think I don't want to spoil it, even though we tell people to watch things, but watch Poison for the Fairies on Shudder. Because also I will say, the whole film, the entire film, is shot like a Peanuts episode, like a Charlie Brown episode, where they don't show the parent.
Yeah.
They never
I know
show an adult unless it's for shock. Unless it's for someone, I won't say why, but unless it's for like a shock
there are
or
moments,
reasons.
yes.
But if you're seeing the father, he's the mayor's secretary in the Powerpuff Girls. Like, you never see that. It's always from
Miss Bellum.
Yes, Miss Bellum. It's always from their perspective, looking at the children. And I loved it. I thought it was really well done. So, or
they're literally be on screen but facing the other way, or like cut out, like So it's I don't know. There's just something that I really enjoyed about that movie.
Also, the beginning. Sorry, I just hit my mic. The beginning goes harder than anything until the end of the movie. Like, it's really bookended with like two really badass moments.
100%. I know exactly what you're talking about, and overall, I like even the things that are not perfect. Like, there's just an overall like tone and aesthetic that even when things aren't perfect in that movie, I just like enjoyed the fucking movie, man.
I agree. And listen, we could remake this low budget, dude. We could do it low budget. We totally could. Anyways, I'm inspired after talking to Chandler, and I think that's a great segue to our conversation with Chandler Baker. Sean, any final thoughts before the conversation?
Dude, any final thoughts? Steve, I got 4 pages of final fucking thoughts. Where do I even begin? I really, really, really enjoy Chandler's writing, and I think you guys should go and check her out 100%. If you're looking for something quick, if you can't really fully jump into a novel, obviously read Big Bad. You should be reading it before this anyway, but Chandler's writing is just really compelling without having to rely on like intense plot moments, and that's just a thing that I really, really enjoy. She builds up tension really well. She's really good at just internal dialogue of characters. There's so many things I could say. I'm still processing her work. I am a new fan, but the conversation is great. We dive into, I feel like we still barely scraped the surface of all the things that we could have said with her. And excited for you guys to hear it, and excited to talk later down the line, hopefully with her again, once we get to see the movie.
Yes. On that note, we will get you guys over to our conversation with Chandler Baker, the author of Big Bad. And as always, stick around for our mostly horror recs of the week. All right, we are joined today by Chandler Baker. Chandler is a New York Times bestselling author known for her novels The Husbands and Whisper Network. Her recent contribution to Amazon's creature feature collection, Big Bad, has been picked up by Lionsgate to be adapted into a feature film. Chandler, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, we're really excited. We we honestly don't get a lot of authors and novelists. We have in the past, like we'll talk about Grady and Paul as we kind of get into the creature feature thing, but we've had them on, but not as many as we should. I know Sean specifically has been trying to get into read a lot more, and so this is really exciting. But we want to jump into this conversation with a question that we ask a lot of people, And I saw when you posted on your Instagram the news about the adaptation of Big Bad. You called yourself a scaredy cat horror fan. And so
Yes.
that begets the question. I'm really curious if you remember your intro to the genre, and we can talk about your current status with the genre, but your intros, the very first time that you maybe, crept out into the living room and saw something from behind the couch that you probably shouldn't have seen on TV, or, a parent showed you a movie at maybe too young of an age. Do you have any of those sort of memories that you could share with us?
I mean, the first real horror movie I remember watching was The Birds. And
Okay.
I remember feeling very cool because it didn't scare me too
Nice.
badly, or kind of
Right.
like, I'm watching a horror movie, but it's okay. I remember being very scared by Turner and Hooch, if you remember that.
Interesting. Okay.
What part
Anything
got you?
specific about that?
Yeah.
I remember there's like a murder in the beginning of that just really
yeah.
deeply affected me. There was some violence. I was very young. So I thought of myself as very scared for a long time. And even still to this day, I'm someone that can really get in my head, like if I have to stay home alone or just, even during the day, like I think anyone that shows up to my door is trying to kill me. So I am quite sensitive to horror in general, though I do watch a lot.
Interesting. And you also, I mean, you're not only like, you dabble in true crime. Like there's a lot of things where it's do you think that it's interesting that you are sensitive towards like more horrific things or even scarier things, but you're still writing about them? Like is that kind of you getting it out onto the page that helps you kind of cope with those sensitivities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some pushing on a bruise aspect of it, right? And it's just I don't know, you have like a real physical reaction to it. And I think that there's something that I crave about, like, I mean, even if I haven't seen a horror movie, like I almost always will read the synopsis online. Like I just have to know.
Okay.
I love Wikipedia synopses. I'll read them all.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I have always been that way, even since I was young. And as soon as I could, like, sort of look up the ends of things.
You want the details and the plot points, but without the adrenaline rush and the run of it necessarily, or like being taken on the emotional scarring journey.
Yeah,
is that kind of it? Okay.
I do. I'm just very interested in it, but I will also go on the emotional journey. My husband is a big horror guy, and we've been married about 11 years now. And so once I started dating him, every October, he would watch a horror movie every single night of October.
Yes.
And that was what we did. And now we have, yes, I'm sure you guys are the same. Now we have small children, and they do get in the way of our watching sometimes, but that was when I really started to like sit down and watch horror. And I still try to kind of mute how I take it in. Like he doesn't like me to have my phone when we're doing a horror movie, because that's like my way to guard myself against it. Right. Yes. Like, I like knowing what's happening, but I need to be online shopping or something as I'm doing it. Yeah. That's a no-no in our family. So I always like have this like knit blanket that I sit with it over my head, so I can just see a little bit out of it. And I watch every horror movie like that almost. It's ridiculous.
That's amazing.
That's fair. I feel like sometimes in theaters, if I'm getting scared, I'm like, oh, I have to like, pick up my nail really quick. So I'm looking away from the screen, or like, I just need to I need to look at that exit sign really fast so I don't see exactly what's happening.
Techniques.
Yeah. I remember I went on a date in high school, and I saw like, what was the Silence of the Lambs sequel? It was like Red
Dragon.
Red Dragon. Okay. Yeah. I brought a book with me to the movie theater with a flashlight, and the guy I was dating took it away from me, and I cried, which is just really cool.
Wow. You should have been like, I was reading Red Dragon. I was reading the novel. I'm really into this.
Angry. I was so angry. Yeah. Then I didn't watch horror movies for a while.
I love that. Well, listen, everyone has their own ways of coping with that sort of stuff. I am curious. So, you talked about, having kids, and that's something we talk with parents that come on the show about, showing their children horror, or even like horror for kids sort of things. Like you, obviously have, I would call it like teen horror novels that you've written, where it's like Teen Phantom,
Mhm.
Teen Hyde, Teen Frankenstein. You also have like, your more recent Halloween photos of you guys as Universal monsters, which they're
Yes.
10 out of 10 costumes. Is
Thank
that
you,
something?
thank you.
Yeah, no, of course they're wonderful. Is that something where, I guess, how do you approach that? There's obviously a lot of horror for kids that's like toned down and not scary. It's like more the aesthetic. Is that something that, you're open to showing your children?
Yes. I mean, for better or worse, and I'm sure it's for worse, but as a writer, I feel like I always hear these stories of writers watching things way too early, like way before they were ready, and how that shaped them. So I always have this idea that if my kids just kind of consume good stories, like they'll have good taste, or maybe they'll be creative. And maybe that is not true at all. We're also just like a very like spooky family. Like we do Halloween super big. Our house is super decked out. My husband loves to scare. Like I had to set a rule that I could only be scared like once in October, because I just can't live my life like walking around having pranks pulled on me. But the kids enjoy it. So they have a very, I think, firm sense of like what's real and not. My daughter is our oldest. She's 8. She's seen The Birds. She likes Gremlins. He showed her some other stuff. Like they watch the old Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein movies. She really and wants to watch a lot more of it. She is dying to see Megan. That is her dream in life, is to see Megan. She asks us to tell her the story of Megan all the time, which we do.
That's so
That's
funny.
fantastic.
I never realized that Megan would have trickled down into the youth.
It makes sense.
It did.
Well, think about, it was marketed so much. Like, I can imagine kids seeing it in between stuff and being very curious.
Do y'all have kids? Do you guys show your kids? Do you have kids? No kids.
No.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons we ask so much is, we are not parents. But I'm particularly curious about like what psychologically stuff like that does to, to people. Cause I know that I'm filled with anxiety. I'm like broken in these certain ways, but I'm super grateful for all of the things that freaked me out when I was a kid at the same time. So I'm like, man, if I had kids, would I just scar them? Like I would want to take classes on like the appropriate way to show kids or what to protect them from. And I know I'm sure that you're shaking. There's no way.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we're not the models, and we have to be, careful with other kids sometimes, because I don't want to send kids that are at our house home, like having nightmares and stuff. I mean, we had a kid get really upset during live action Little Mermaid at my house the other day, and I was like, oh, okay, this is where, okay, all right.
Yeah, you're gonna run that risk no matter what. I mean, we every week we talk to a different, wonderful, successful creative, and everyone has a different answer about, them being accidentally scarred at a young age watching whatever. You know what I mean? Like mine was a Law and Order thing. Yours was Turner and Hooch to a certain extent. Like,
that's very similar. I feel like that is like a similar vibe. Okay,
100%. And so you're never gonna avoid it. But I think nowadays there's a lot of there's like I've said, like horror for kids, like those Coraline-esque movies and things of that. I mean, I have my girlfriend's nephew is obsessed with Nightmare Before Christmas, and that's it's spooky, but it's very much made for children. So there's no right answer, but we do love to hear, because we were fans as kids as well. So love to hear it.
Always curious about it, especially with it seems like you have these reoccurring themes throughout your work. I as of right now, fairly newer to your work. The creature feature is that the creature feature collection is what really put me onto you, and reading Big Bad and hearing about the Chris Landon news, which is all stuff that we're going to jump to in a bit. But I also read The Husbands by you and looked into loved The Husbands, by the way. Yeah, we're not going to deep dive that today, but I do have some questions about it. But yeah, you talk about motherhood a lot in your story, so hearing your perspective on these things is super interesting. I do have a couple questions about The Husbands, though, before we work our way to Big Bad. There's obvious parallels with the Stepford Wives, and me and Steve were trying to figure out what to call this, but like the term that we kind of landed on for the moment is like dystopian utopias stories, like Pleasantville, Get Out. I think of The Number 12 Looks Just Like You, a Twilight Zone episode, even a chapter from A Wrinkle in Time. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on that, like, narrative device and how you use the themes that you like to talk about in that way. Does that make sense? Sorry, it's kind of like ambiguous.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of putting it that I haven't heard before. Because when I came to The Husbands, which is sort of a gender flip Stepford Wives, I was really interested in the way we've seen Stepford schemes played in the past has always been sort of the perpetrators of the Stepford scheme are using it to, like, they're the traditionally empowered class of people, and they're using it to subjugate and to keep a traditionally less empowered group of people from, like, finally rising to power in some way, and in so doing reveal themselves to be sort of small and pathetic. And I was interested if there was ever a world where we could justify the Stepford scheme a little bit. If there was a way for us to look at it and say, you know what, that kind of makes sense. That's not such a bad idea. The people that are being Stepforded are not the victims. And I just thought that was a really fun challenge. And like you said, I talk a lot about motherhood and about being a working woman. And so I did it, and I used it to talk about the division of domestic labor and modern marriages and the problem we have with, like, gender roles at home. And clearly the Stepford scheme goes awry in many ways, but at its heart, like, it was very important to me that men were not the victims at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, the whole time I was reading it, I was like, I feel like so many husbands should read this, just because you have I really love the way that your character Nora is so like diplomatic, like even through her frustrations, like it seems like she's always considering everybody else's perspectives and stuff, and you don't really establish clear victims like in the Stepford Wives. I haven't read the book yet, I intend to, but I've seen the 2004 movie, and in that the husbands are all very villainous and completely disgusting, and in this there aren't really like any straight villains. Like even the at least Hayden, Nora's husband, isn't like absolutely problematic. He is definitely flawed and inconsiderate, and she justifyingly would like him to be better, but overall there's no like clear villain. And so it was just an interesting way to like talk about these things. I loved the nuance of it all. I'm still processing it still. I finished it today. Finished it a few hours ago. Yeah.
I mean, none of my friends that I don't think are married to men that aren't trying to be good partners, right? Like all of my friends are like smart, like modern women that have modern marriages where the guys in them are well-intentioned and are all sort of dad 2.0 types that are trying to do more than their fathers did. And I felt like I'm not very interested in talking about men that are not even making that effort.
Sure.
And it just doesn't feel relevant to my life. So I think Hayden is like a quote unquote good guy, but even amongst that group, like, why is it that women are still carrying so much more of the burden of domestic labor and like maintaining kinship relationships and doing the mental load? Like, why are we falling so short? And like, what's it going to take for us to get that extra few miles?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, have you specifically read Ira's take? Because I know that scene is like a feminist story, and it's definitely talking about the woman perspective, but from a a man wrote it. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on his take on those sorts of things then in comparison.
Yeah, I did read it at the time that I was like towards the end, I think, of when I was writing the book. So it's been a few years. It's a very short, thin little book. I thought it really holds up. I mean, I feel like the men that are doing the Stepford scheme, you know, they seem so small and pathetic, and I feel like it's a great commentary. I also think the movie holds up really well, like the original movie. I think I've seen all the iterations now, but
I haven't seen. I didn't know. I only knew about the 2004 movie. Like my grandma had me watch the 2004 movie when I was a little kid, so it's always stuck in my head and used to creep me out much more then than it does now. I rewatched it for the first time in years, but I didn't know about the 75 movie until recently, and I need to see it because it seems like it leans more like the 2004 one is. It's definitely creepy, but it leans into like a comedic aspect more, and that looked like, you know, they were trying to follow the steam of Rosemary's Baby or something.
Yes,
and
yes, feels very much in that world. I thought it was really good. I liked it.
I have to give it a watch.
I am curious before we get into Big Bad, so obviously a lot of the things that you do, you talk about, you know, writing about modern women and women, women in the workplace, and your background with being a lawyer and even working at these larger places that you've worked at and then shifting to being an author. Is that something where the decision to do that like was led to frustrations with where you were working and maybe like the treatment or just the realities of how things are and should change, and you wanted to say something about it, and that's why you started writing novels with kind of the focus that you do, because obviously you have like a very specific intention in what you write, even in Big Bad as well, like a lot of the themes are consistent there, but it seems like a really large shift, and obviously you've been so successful in writing these novels, so I'm really curious like what the inciting incident, I guess, of like that change was in your career.
Yeah. When I started writing, I was like a junior in college, and so I was at that time there was a big sort of renaissance in YA literature. There was like John Green and Lauren Oliver and Gail Forman and all these great authors, and I was much closer to a teen myself at that point. So it just kind of felt natural that that's what I started writing, and I don't even remember how I found my way into like writing some YA horror. Like even my debut with Disney was called Alive, and had a lot of horror elements to it, and then all of the high school horror books. But you know, they did okay. They got published and whatever, had some audience, but not a huge one. And as I was a lawyer, I always wanted an escape route the whole time. Like I wanted to find a way out of practicing law if possible. I was following both in tandem. I published, I think, 6 books before I was able to leave being a lawyer. And so when I made the shift to adult novels, I just really committed to trying to write something that was much more closer to the stage of life that I was in at the time. By that point, I was really involved in my own personal book club. We were reading a lot of, women's fiction and thrillers. That was just what we liked. So again, it felt natural. And then I just kept thinking to myself, like, what am I thinking about all the time? Like, what do I find myself talking to about with my girlfriends when we're going on walks or having lunch or whatever? Like, what is the stuff that we can't shut up about? And then how do I sort of like bury that broccoli in a very like juicy thriller or genre story, so I can have that social commentary, and that seemed to have connected with people. So it's always just taking like my most specific thoughts, and a lot of that has been my work experience, or my experience working and trying to have a family, and yeah, it's connected.
I love that, and it's actually the reason that I'm curious is I saw the film American Fiction earlier today. I don't know if you've seen it or heard. So
I have a screener that I'm wanting to listen to today.
Nice. So
today or soon. Yeah.
So I have wanted to see it for a while, and obviously, like the premise for those that may not know is following Jeffrey Wright, who's a Black novelist, and he basically is tired of novels about the Black experience being kind of like trauma porn, and so he writes these straight novels, but they don't get picked up, and so he does something that's more of satire, and It's kind of like what you're talking about with like burying the broccoli with something that's a bit more juicy to like really get that perspective out there and get these issues or things that you're thinking about out there. Do you find that that's um, I don't want to say like a bummer that you have to do like that you have to make it true crime or you have to make it horrific or you have to make it X, Y, and Z to have people care about these issues? Or do you think that that's kind of like a necessary evil with, getting, a female perspective into, popular novels?
I am not bummed by it because I mean the fact is nobody wants to be assigned homework for their leisure reading or viewing. I mean I don't. Reading is a big commitment. Even though I read a lot, like I'm sort of a relatively slow reader, or at least I don't have as much time for it as I wish. And I want it to be fun and I want to like not dread picking it up again. So I'm happy to try to be as escapist or as thrilling or propulsive as I can be. And I don't know, it's been a natural fit for me. Like my favorite part of writing sort of are those riffs that I go on that are social commentary. Like I even write them specifically at this point so that people can quote them because I find they often get quoted. And so I'll make sure not to put a character name in them. I'll make sure to try to avoid pronouns, all those things so that people can lift them and connect with them if they want to in a different way. Nice. But I think I don't know. I think that they both serve each other really well. And yeah, I if I wanted to do it otherwise, I could write nonfiction, I guess.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I love that. Not that like I wasn't saying that to like state my opinion, but I totally agree with that. I think that it's a very valuable, like you need to be able to spoon feed people those sort of things or like make it digestible. Like that's the way that like creativity has always been. Like it's not people are not willing to just read like a hardcover nonfiction book to learn about something. You kind of have to, like here comes the airplane with them. Not that that's necessarily what your novels are, but like I think that that's such a important aspect of like entertainment in general.
Well, that makes me think, can I say really quick, I love your writing style. I was so impressed specifically with the husbands because it's not just like spoonfuls, like you're talking about so many things. And when I was prepping for the interview, I was trying to decide between Cutting Teeth and The Husbands and which one I should read in relation to our show, for horror. And I ended up going with The Husbands because I had seen that there were potentially Stepford Wives, like parallels and stuff. And yeah, it's funny we talk about like getting spoon feeding these ideas and these messages in with like thriller and exciting stuff. But you're the way that you went about this wasn't to start off with this like incredibly thrilling, like you didn't start with this like intense dramatic opening. It relies so much on your writing, specifically the way you're telling the story and the characters, where there isn't really like this incredibly thrilling thing that happens or catches you and pulls you through. It's just entertaining on its own. I hope that comes off the right way. It was so like you build up, like everything is building up, and it's not like you had to like have an explosion at the beginning to get me. So you talked about so many things. Yeah, it was, sorry, that conversation made me realize like just how impressive that was, that it didn't feel like homework and we talked about a lot of really important stuff.
I think in a lot of kinds of entertainment, I mean, definitely in books, people are so excited when they see a specific thought they've had or like a very specific experience that they thought was just them, and they see it on the page and they can recognize it. There's something so cathartic about like sort of that confession and feeling listened to that can happen within a book. And I think that that's the thing that people are reacting to.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Completely agree.
Absolutely.
I do want to shift to the Creature Feature collection. It was so funny because Sean and I have known about this for a while. I know Sean's read a couple of them, obviously including Big Bad. Can you talk about where this came from or how you were approached to write one of the shorts in this collection? Because obviously there's a lot of great, people, yourself included, that are in this, but more, Grady, Paul, Joe Hill specifically, like are known as like horror writers, and I feel like this is maybe a little bit different from what you're normally doing, although if you read Big Bad, it feels natural in the cadence of your work. Can you talk about, how this was brought to you, and maybe even about the idea for Big Bad to start?
Yeah. I probably had the idea maybe like a year and a half ago. I had kind of this half-baked idea that I wanted to write sort of a domestic suspense, like a straight sort of domestic suspense story that felt almost like Girl on Train or Gone Girl or something like that in tone. But with a big genre element with werewolves, and I wanted to see if I could make that werewolf piece feel I don't know, more intimate, I guess, and if I could really ground it in the family dynamics. I actually came to the story because I was really interested in writing about what it feels like to raise a quote unquote difficult child. My daughter is, like I said, she's almost 8, and she is just like a complicated gal with big feelings, and and she's great and she's amazing, but she really is. And I became curious, like, okay, what type of, how do I think about like how that girl is feeling in the world, how the family interacts around her, what kind of woman is her mother, what kind of woman does she grow up to become. And it sort of became this story about like a bright, shiny woman and her husband who fell in love with her for being bright and shiny, but then feels sort of resentful of her when she continues to be the person that he married. Or does he? That's kind of the question, I guess, of the story. But so it sort of evolved. I'm not like an outliner or anything, so I really go into it just with like a tiny nugget of an idea and just go for it. And so I think I told my literary agent, and I think actually my film and TV agents, I'm like, I have this weird idea about wolves, and it's domestic suspense, and they're like, okay. They looked at me like I was insane. But my literary agent like agreed to I had done one other short story for Amazon. He's like, well, I'll ask if they want anything. And they said yes right away, my same editor that I'd worked for. And then, yeah, and then we did the thing, and it,
Nice.
I don't know.
Cool. I was very curious if how that worked, like if they just kind of reached out to people and were like, do you have a creature-esque short story and that you're either working on or have finished that we can throw in a collection, or if they come to you with an idea for a collection and then you whip up something then in terms of a deadline or something.
I think it's a little bit of both for
Okay.
people. Like if you come with an idea and they're like, oh yeah, we have this collection that it would fit in. And I think that's kind of what happened with me, because it did take a beat for them to just answer. So I assume they were kind of figuring out like what their
Processing.
Halloween type collection was going to be. In the interim, I was like, I'm just going to write it as a script then, because I hadn't heard. And then I ended up obviously going back and writing the short story version.
So
Absolutely.
you already have a script. I'm really curious about your writing process. You talking about not outlining, because that blows my mind. So you have a concept. Are you writing it more like free flowing as like a treatment and seeing where it goes? Or, I mean, I guess in this instance, you talked about writing it as a script first. So this is a weird instance, but like, what is that process like? You go, domestic wolf, like all those little pieces, and then you just start letting it go, or what is that like?
Yeah, I literally just start writing. Like I think I started with the line, I think my daddy's a bad guy, or something like that. I think that's maybe still the first line. And just went from there, and like just switched perspectives when I felt like it was fun. And there is something about these short fiction pieces that are really fun and really freeing. Although that's how I write novels too. I mean, I wrote all of the husbands. I had, I think, a couple paragraphs of a pitch when I sold it, and that was it. And then wrote the whole first draft, threw it away, started over from a blank page, and rewrote the novel again. So I'm very comfortable with like the with the cut it and go again.
Sure.
But I think there's probably a more efficient process in there that I should discover at some
Well,
point.
I love that. It feels like a great way to not have like overthinking. I think that's like one of the biggest things is that I know I personally struggle with. I could probably speak for Sean. Like Sean
You
overthinks a lot
100%.
too.
I have to overthink everything. I can't get anything done.
In every
get
creative
stuck.
way. Yeah, and so I think when you're able to just be free flowing, when you're able to just be like, all right, this is the genesis of it. I'm gonna just go and see what happens. I feel like that's a wonderful way to create something.
Yeah.
And also,
are you guys both writers? Sorry, I'm asking.
No, would love to. It's this. We're neither parents nor writers. We got
Okay.
no. I mean, Sean and I have been creatives and friends for a long time. But I think we have a lot of ideas, and and even talking with people like yourself and directors and a lot of people that just say, just do it, just make the thing, just write the thing. Like that's. Sometimes I need to like look myself in the mirror. I'm
gonna peer pressure you guys so hard.
Do it.
Let's do it.
Do it,
Chandler. I'll send you a 90-page script in like 2 days because you got something going with me now.
I'm ready.
I need to do it.
The time restraints are like a big thing for me. Like knowing that something has to be done. Like. Mm-hmm. I feel like I would do better. Like if I was in this exact situation, if Amazon came to me and was like, you have to do this by this date, like I could survive that.
Yeah.
But if I just have an open-ended, like write whatever you want, finish it when you can, like trust your process, I will just sit there and overthink and toss an idea
it's
in and
out.
It's
the SpongeBob scene where he just writes the letter like the, or he writes the very fancy.
Yeah.
That's all that it is.
Yeah.
I'll develop something for a second and then leave it and do something else, and I just can't. The discipline, it's very impressive.
Unless I create like a lot of stress for myself, like I have to feel as though I'm gonna have a mild heart attack to get anything done. Like I waited, I had the idea for this story and I knew I was going to write it. I knew the deadline was going to be coming up, but I'm like, I'm only gonna leave myself a certain amount of time. I'm like, I don't want to have more than 3 weeks to write this thing. Like that is the time. That's the time I want. And so I just made sure to fill my time up to then. I was like, okay, it's go time. Let's do this thing.
Yeah. It's like a professor in college when they're like, you have the whole semester to do this 10-page paper. Yeah. And I'm not doing any of it until the last week. That's the only, because that's when the best work happens. Really quick. You talked about, going back to Big Bad. I have so many. I think listening to Big Bad and The Husbands back to back, I see a ton of parallels, obviously, with that family and topics that mean a lot to you. You mentioned that you changed perspectives when it was fun. And that's one of the things I was really curious about in this story. It seems like a lot of what we're talking about in that story is the stress on Rachel and all the things that she's doing and how that's affecting her relationship and the resentment with Sam. And I'm just curious about the decision to, a bulk of that story is told from Sam's perspective. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. I have another little one after what you're going to say about the girls too. But
yeah, well, I think the fun. Wait, how spoilery are we allowed to be here?
We always recommend that people listen. This is it's a short. You guys can listen to it, listen to it
Get
or read
an Audible
it in about an hour and a half
for 2 days, and you will finish this really fast.
Yeah, super fast.
So we always recommend it. We would prefer people wait to listen to the episode.
Okay.
And talk about it after. This is book club.
Yeah. Okay, so this is permission. Yeah, the rules of book club, permission to spoil.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the fun in my mind of the story was like, who is the big bad, and trying to continue to shift who we thought it was going to be, and being in Sam's head. I think we as an audience bring a lot of the narratives that we've been consuming about men in his position. Like, he seems incredibly passive aggressive. He seems, sort of monosyllabic. He seems maybe a little bit actually aggressive, and we view him and we're like, we know this character. He is a guy that is resentful of his wife's success. Like, we know him and we hate him for it. But that's not really the truth of all that's going on, right? He's been dealing with the fact that his wife's been a werewolf and maybe killed his child at one point. And yeah, so it felt fun to be in his head and to continue to play that out, but play it out in a way that like feels logical once you understand the entirety. I knew I wanted to be in the girls, the two sisters who were quite young. I wanted to be in their head as well because they're kind of the little detectives of the story. They're piecing together like the sort of original sin of their family and what happened and who their dad really is. And they come to a very wrong conclusion. But I think the way that they get there is super logical. I mean, like,
absolutely.
Who can blame them?
Yeah.
They're not dumb. They just get it wrong based on the facts that they have. So I felt like, I don't know. I really wanted, like, even though it started it started with one of the daughters, and that's how I got into it. And then it kind of became about their marriage. Families are so complicated, and every family member always sort of has a very valid lens through which they see sort of the hurts and the joys that make up the history of their family. And I wanted to like give each of them sort of a platform to explore that.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I, with that, you obviously, do you tell the story from everyone's perspective at one point or another?
Mm-hmm.
At the end, so again, spoilers, at the end, when Odie has been bit by her mom, and they kind of have that moment. I love that, Rachel, was very like, there's basically two ways that this can go. I'm leaving it up to you guys. But in that moment, Rachel seems almost like impartial. Like she's maybe impartial is not the right word, but we're not focused on how she's feeling. She's very it almost seems like she's just numb and ready to deal with what's happened and ready to let her like daughters decide her fate. And I was just curious in that moment when June notices that Odie is bit. It's June that notices. It's not the mom, and it's June that's concerned about it, and it's not Rachel. And I was just wondering, I guess it felt like Rachel noticing that and having feelings about that felt like what I would expect. And I love that it wasn't that, but I was just curious why you chose June's perspective in that moment, or if there was a reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the end has been, people's reaction to the end has been so interesting to me. I mean, I guess one, I would say, like, I have always been really inspired and really loved horror about motherhood. I love like The Babadook and Hereditary and Goodnight Mommy. Like, those are all things that I really connect with. But in all of those, like, women are essentially destroyed by motherhood in the end. Like it is bleak for mothers out there in horror. And so I really wanted to see if I could come to a different ending for sort of the women of Big Bad. And so part of that, wrapped in the Rachel doll was like Odie, her behavior is sort of like, she doesn't fit in perfectly with societal expectations of how, a young girl should act. She had big feelings. She's, her dad is kind of frustrated with her behavioral issues. And June is often frustrated with her sister's behavioral issues. So there's this feeling, I think, that we get that is almost kind of hopeful with Odie being bitten, that like now her outsides are kind of going to match her insides. We understand that like her feralness somehow is kind of going to be manifest, which feels weirdly powerful. And depending on people's perspectives, like maybe a bit of a bummer for June, who's been kind of the dutiful older sister, and now that her dad is dead, is she going to be tasked as the caregiver of the family? Yeah. Or also like she kind of played the protector also earlier in the narrative. is Odie actually going to be in a position to be able to protect her in some ways? So I think it's all just kind of depending upon people's perspective. And that scene when Rachel does feel kind of neutral or impartial in some ways, I've been really shocked by people's reactions. You know, one of the first things Chris Landon said to me when we talked about the story was, he was like, well, Rachel's lying, right? Like she killed Mason, like she killed her child while she was a werewolf. And I was like, and that is not my headcanon.
No, not
but
mine either.
Then I went and asked my husband. I was like, hey, what do you think happened? She was like, oh, Rachel's lying. Like, of course, that's what happened. Yes. And I've talked to so many people that is their truth, that Rachel really killed her son while she was a werewolf and is lying to her daughters to get them to agree to this. And I always say, like, once a story is out of an author's hands, like, it belongs to other people as much as it belongs to me. Like, I don't have the right answer to it. I can talk about my intent, but so yeah, the way people have interpreted that neutrality or impartiality by Rachel, I felt was sort of generous on her part, but other people found it very nefarious.
Sorry, I'm processing that because that had not even occurred to me to think that she was lying. Because to me, you obviously lead us to believe that is how we know that she's responsible for Mason's death. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Mason.
Yes.
Sorry, I had to remember the name. Mason's death, and then that moment to me was like, no, like it didn't even occur to me that she would be lying. It was like, no, like she's way more complex as a character than that, and life is more complex. Like, like this terrible, like even with her being a werewolf, like that's not how it died. Like life happened, accidents happen, and her not being able to hurt her kid. I don't know. I don't agree, Chris. Chris needs to reread it before he makes the movie. You got to get Chris back on.
I have heard it from a lot of people, or other people say like she has built this. Because people have like equated it to. I've heard a lot of people equated it to like alcoholism, like her werewolfness is like alcoholism. And an allegory for that, and she's built this fiction around like to allow herself to live with it. I don't know. I've heard all the things, and I kind of love it all.
It's so interesting that you as the author can get subtext from other people reading your own work, like that didn't exist when you were making
and then
it.
I feel like an idiot, right? I'm like,
well,
it's a whole different story too,
because I personally am like, the way that you wrote it is the way that it should be portrayed. And I love an adaptation, don't get me wrong, but like, you should be the end all be all. But on that note, so you mentioned Chris. We had Chris on when he did We Have a Ghost and chatted about his work. Love Chris's work. Can you talk about, it seemed like you're pretty excited based on your Instagram post about it. Talked about Freaky being one of your, favorites that you revisit a lot. Can you talk about, working with Chris to make this come to life?
Yeah, I would just feel really fortunate. I took a bunch of meetings, but Chris was probably my second. I met with him. And he wasn't like, it wasn't through Lionsgate or Hidden Pictures or anything at that point. Like we just met to see if we connected. But like I said, I was already a really big fan of Freaky. I love Happy Death Day. I think I said in my Instagram post, like I've done like the Blumhouse, Halloween Horror Nights, mazes more than once. And told him that. I was like, big fan. No, I just think I think he's so great with like a clean premise and has such great story engines, and they're really fun. Freaky, I think, has a really great dose of social commentary too.
Absolutely.
And yeah, just really admired him. But yeah, when we talked, we just really hit it off. We're able to talk about the story, and he had these interesting thoughts. I didn't know sort of like what the tone he would be envisioning is, because he has sort of a range of tones. I was like, oh, are we doing like pop or, like real like horror comedy? But that wasn't really his vision. And I not that there couldn't be, I think anytime you do a creature feature, right, it feels like that could be the direction. It feels like you could go very meta with it. But I think that there's a different version of that is like the tone of the short story. And I think that that's what he saw and that's what I saw. And he really took the helm of pulling it all together. Like he went to Lionsgate himself. He went to Todd Lieberman and was like, okay, let's do this. And so,
hell yeah.
I mean, it was like December 23rd and they're like, are we doing it or not? I was like, okay, yes, I guess we are.
Wow. That's so
Yeah.
You said when you first started this though, you wrote a whole script for it. Are you the screenwriter? Is that informing what the final is going to be, or will it be pieces of that? Because like Sean and I see movies sometimes where it's like, oh, that would be better as a short film. And so I'm sure it's difficult to take something that is originally shorter and make it obviously feature film length. So is that something where you already have those pieces of what the feature looks like?
Yeah, I didn't finish the script before we found out that we were going to do it as a short story. So I probably have like 3/4 of a script done, which it was kind of one of those things that's like the short story idea informed the script. And then when I went back to the short story, I changed. So everything has kind of amalgamated into what it is. I am the screenwriter on the adaptation of Big Bad. I think a lot will continue to change just because of all the conversations I've had around it now. This is my second short story that I've adapted. I really like the short story adaptation process, like adapting that. I also adapted The Husbands. And that is such a game of subtraction. It's like, okay, how do you take this mystery, this thriller, and take out all these elements from it because you have so much less room in a movie and still make it make sense. And when you're starting with a short story, it's this great sort of launch pad. And you can kind of, I don't know, you have to kill fewer darlings, I guess. But I don't know, I do. And thankfully, I think, he agreed with me that I feel like there's sort of a mean, lean horror movie already in the short story of Big Bad.
Absolutely.
It feels sort of home invasion-y in a weird way, I think, in structure. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Us too. It's
can't wait. Cannot wait.
Yeah, it's good to know, that the people that are working on this, you and Chris, so you've connected and that it's all positives moving forward. Yeah, it's wonderful to hear. Because I feel like far too often things get passed along to multiple different hands, and the original great piece is lost. And it's great to hear that that's not going to happen with this adaptation. And always just excited for whatever Chris is doing next. So stoked to eventually get this.
Me too.
We have really appreciated your time, Chandler. Before we wrap, we do want to ask for what we call mostly horror recommendations. So for all of our listeners, this is where we would like to hear a horror film and then a non-horror film, or in your case, a horror novel and a non-horror novel that you would like to recommend for our listeners this week. Feel free to take a moment and think about what you'd like to recommend. But we'd love to hear what you got for us.
Okay. Let's see. All right. I am going to do, I'll say for a novel, I am going to do that's non-horror, but still kind of scary, Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll, which is sort of like a retelling of Ted Bundy from the perspective of the women. And just like the thesis of it is that he was not a genius, that he was not particularly smart at all, that he was kind of just a sad little man, that he's not actually that good looking, that, that none of the stuff that we that we believe to be true in the legend of Ted Bundy is anything. And that women thought he was creepy the whole time. So I think that that's really good from an author I really admire. And then let's see, horror movies. I want to know what you guys saw this year that you really loved. So I'm going to make you recommend to me. But
I have a good one for you that I'll say when you're done. I have a good one.
Okay. I'm excited. I think my favorite horror movie I watched this year, which actually I think was a 2022 movie, but was Influencer, and I don't feel like a ton of people saw that.
I didn't get to see it yet. No.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was looking at it the other day.
I've heard good things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I thought that was a fun one. I didn't have like my most robust horror movie watching experience this October, but I don't know what the reasons for that were. What did I miss?
You're a busy person. I mean, there was a lot of good stuff this most recent year, but what I'm gonna say, so you were talking about Hereditary, which is probably my number one, but Hereditary, Babadook, and there was a third one in there where
Goodnight
mothers.
Mommy.
Oh, Goodnight Mommy, yeah, where mothers are just kind of like eaten up by motherhood in general. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Relic.
No, I haven't.
It's not necessarily a film about motherhood, but it is basically 3 generations of women, kind of a twist on a haunted house tale. But it's really it's along the same lines of like a Hereditary, less intense than Ari Aster's film seemed to be, but really good. Would really recommend it. I think for what you're talking about enjoying.
I'll throw if you haven't seen Josh Rubin's Werewolves Within yet, just with Werewolves on the Mind. You haven't seen it?
All right. No, I have not seen it. I actually have not seen a ton of werewolf movies. I mean, I've seen like American Werewolf in Paris and that kind of stuff. But
it is very much so a play on like it plays with it a lot in ways that I think you will find very entertaining. And Josh Rubin's just great. And,
Josh and Chris have kind of similar tonality in their films too, so I think that you'll enjoy it if you like Chris's movies.
I think you'll dig it.
Well, awesome. Chandler, we really appreciate the time. Again, really love your work. Really excited to see whatever's coming next. Thank you again for being on the show. And listeners, again, if you somehow didn't listen to us and you haven't read Big Bad, please go do that now and check out the rest of Chandler's work. Chandler, thank you again. We're really excited for whenever this film's dropping. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to our conversation with Chandler Baker. And thank you again to Chandler for hopping on to the show and chatting with us. We have reached the moment of the episode where it's time for Mostly Horror Rex. And I don't remember who did it first last time.
Either. We got to get better at that.
Yeah. We got a list. Chelsea made us a list of what we recommended. You probably did.
I think I did.
Yeah, you probably did because I did the thing after. All right. My recommendation this week is actually something that I've not yet finished, but I'm going to recommend it because I thoroughly enjoy where it's going and am excited for what it's going to be. And that is the Showtime, and I guess at this point also Paramount Plus show, The Curse. It is a show written and directed by Benny Safdie and Nathan Fielder, starring Benny Safdie, Nathan Fielder, and Emma Stone. I wanted to watch it since it came out, and I didn't keep up with the weekly episodes, and I saw an insane reaction to the final episode of the season. So as with all Nathan Fielder things, I'm really excited because I'm sure that this goes into a place that other things probably never have gone before. I want to pull up Christopher Nolan did a Q&A with Benny Safdie and Nathan Fielder because they screened the final episodes of this. And Christopher Nolan said this in talking with them. He said, "There are so few shows that come along that genuinely have no precedence." He compared it to Twin Peaks, and he said, "So you're in an amazing space, and I can't wait for audiences to catch up with the climax." So to give a little bit of an inkling of info, basically Nathan Fielder and Emma Stone play this couple who are trying to create an HGTV show called Flipanthropy. And so they are in New Mexico and they're making an HGTV show. And yeah, anyone who knows me knows that I love The Rehearsal. I love Nathan For You. I
Yeah.
think Nathan Fielder's a genius. And so
Can we
I'm
use this
so
as an excuse
excited.
to get him?
I would love. It's not a horror show. I would still love to get him.
Oh, it looks like it.
It was kind of like pitched like a horror show, and I don't know if it like devolves
Okay.
into something. I honestly don't.
Okay.
I'm 4 episodes into a 10 episode season,
Okay.
and so really curious where it's gonna go. But that's my rec. Watch The Curse, follow along with me. If you finished it, feel free to hit me with like a warning message, and then say your thoughts, and I won't look at it till I'm done. But yeah, again, I love where this is going. It also has like a lot of the Safdie brothers, like obviously it's written and directed by Benny Safdie too, but it has a lot of their fingerprints on it as well. The way it's shot, the music, the dialogue, very like Safdie esque.
Right on.
So
I will start it soon. Watching a lot more this year. So
it's a fun one.
Heck
But
yeah.
What do you got?
Well, so before, really quick, I just want to say I just recently learned that Emma Stone's actual name is Emily, and it's not like she changed it. Like she prefers to go by Emily. Like even in fucking interviews, she asks people to call her Emily, and the only reason that she's has gone by Emma Stone is because I don't know the exact like something with actors guilds and unions and something about the industry. They don't like to have like 2 of the same names. There was already an Emily Stone, so she started going by Emma. It's literally, dude, there's interviews of Ryan Gosling referring to, like, they're both in an interview together and he's referring to her as Emily, and the interviewer like goes, "You have to stop calling her Emily." And they both just kind of like look, and Emma's like, "That's my name." She's like, "That's what I want people to call me." And then there's other ones of her like correcting interviewers and then still saying Emma over and over again. I had no fucking idea.
That's interesting.
No
I
fucking
didn't know
idea.
that either.
Yeah.
Also, then that just takes away from the meme from Pearl where she's saying I'm a star, but it sounds like Emma Stone, Australian.
Yeah. Your meme's been defeated, dude.
Fuck.
But yeah, I just thought that was super. I just saw it like 2 or 3 days ago.
Interesting. You learn
Speaking of
something new
things
every day.
that, right? Speaking of things that I saw 2 or 3 days ago, obviously I've been cramming in a lot of reading for this episode. It's taken up a bit more of my time, so I haven't been watching as much. But I did finish this. This might be kind of a cheat. But I want to recommend The Husbands, the things that we talk about in this episode. I think you guys should read it. But I did finish Monarch finally.
Oh.
The Godzilla show. And I know that I've talked a little bit about it. We've talked about kaijus pretty much since like late October, November. I've brought up kaiju stuff a lot. I was torn on how to feel about Monarch. It took me a second to while it was interesting the whole time, it took me a second to start caring about any of the characters, really. And I couldn't relate with like their logic and decisions in a lot of ways. And also the premise of our monsterverse has gotten a little silly, I think, specifically since Godzilla vs. Kong and stuff. But something about the end of Monarch brought me back in. I ended up really caring about the characters, and I'm just more accepting of what the monsterverse is doing and more excited for X-Kong after finishing it. So I'm just going to recommend that if you started it, if you didn't start it because you thought you were just out, you want to like it, but you didn't have any hope, or if you started it and kind of lost steam, try to give it another shot, get through it. And yeah, it wraps up well, and it's got some cool shit, and it gets me hyped up for what's next.
All right, because that's how I feel about it. That's how I felt about the first episode. I was like,
yeah,
so I'll have to dive in, especially if it means providing context before Godzilla X Kong comes out.
It provides context for everything. Like it gives, like, I need to go and rewatch everything. Because it just like it establishes a lot, and it's goofy. You got to go in like it's a different tone.
Well, Godzilla X
this
Kong
doesn't super work.
Well,
yeah, dude, it's been goofy since MonsterVerse. But the only one with like a really serious, like more quote unquote realistic tone is the first one, and you don't agree. You think that the first one's dumb. I don't understand how you don't. Even though you think it's bad, they're not trying to be as like
it is
goofy.
Serious.
Yeah,
it's more serious. So is the second one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yes, but so but this, it leans more into the goofy, and it reminds me of like Toho age.
Yeah, which I
age
think
Godzilla
I
stuff.
think that's kind of what their plan is. In
Yes,
seeing some
100%.
things that Jared has posted about the new film that's coming out, Jared Krzyzewski, who designed all the wonderful, most of the wonderful monsters that are
Straight
going to
up.
be in this new movie. Yeah, really, really exciting stuff, even if it's goofy.
The last thing, so this is not a rec, but I mentioned that I was going to bring up something at the end of the episode. This is not a full whatever.
Okay.
But I'm going to be sending you, I just haven't brought it up yet, but Congress, I didn't talk about this yet. Did I say that David Krzyzewski finally, not David Krzyzewski.
David Krzyzewski. David Grush.
The David Grush finally like presented or at least some of the stuff he was talking about was presented to Congress. They had this meeting. Did I talk about that meeting at all? No. So it's not a full Alien segment, but I'm going to be doing like an Alien update probably very soon. And I just want people to go and look. You can find it online. Videos. There's of all these Congress members coming out of the meeting that they were just in. There's like news reporters that are catching them, asking them like pretty straightforward questions, and you can tell that they have all been rattled, and that's all that I wanted to point to. Like, you can tell that they have all been rattled, and like there's a couple people that come out that are like, we obviously, like, I wanted more answers. I wanted, I'm excited to actually get the fucking like meat on.
Yeah.
But those are people that were already, I think, leaning in
interested in
believing stuff more, and then other people have finally like had like a shell cracked for them, if that makes sense. You could see it in their fucking dude. Just watch the video.
All right, send it to me.
So shit is coming. Is all I'm saying. I'll send it to you right after this. Maybe I'll post a link online, but you guys can find it really easy. Just it happened earlier this month. I think it was like it's like the 3rd or the 6th or something. I know that's still vague. I should know my shit, but I don't. But earlier this month, just look up like
come out in February. It's gonna be so confusing.
Find it earlier in January.
Everyone's gonna be like,
I'm a mess, guys.
Just looking up.
Aliens are coming. I'm sorry, I'm not the perfect vessel for that news.
That's all right.
But yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up.
All right, I'm interested, and I will look it up. On that note, thank you guys again for listening. As always, my cat is crawling on the desk. Arya, watch out. Send us an email, mostlyhorrormovienight@gmail.com. You can send us a message on Instagram @mostlyhorrorpod. We are on TikTok and Twitter @mostlyhorror. I'm everywhere at Steven is Average. Sean is everywhere at Hypocrite Inc. or Hypocrite.Inc. And that's all we got for you this week. We'll catch you next time. Arya, say something to the microphone.
God, Rick Ross breathing. You hear that? She said.
She was not happy. All right, we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye.